that he has just died but will not yet go to the afterlife. In short, Rio has become the ultimate victim of the infamous truck. Now it's up to Michael to send him to a new world. To start a life from scratch, according to Michael, Ryan will not receive any special mission or a great goal. Living in that new world, he is free to live as he pleases. When Rio expresses his desire to lead a peaceful and relaxed life, Michael has no objections, but first, to send it, Michael needs to give Rio a quick summary of the world in which he will be reincarnated. The world is called Phi 1.
Magic Land, where about 20% of the population can use facts linked to their natural elementary affinity in the case of
Rio. His strongest affinity is with the element of water. As Rio asked for a peaceful and relaxed life, Michael went ahead and prepared a little house for him. As an initial team, he included 2 tutorial books, a knife, and even placed
a protective barrier around the house to keep the monsters away as part of their kit. Michael provided Rio with an ice house with enough food for 2 months. Make sure he doesn't go hungry in the short term. In addition, Michael included a guidebook with information detailed about all the monsters that the river could find in the region, although this will be useful for them later to deal with the creatures from the forest. For now, Rio is focused on testing its new magic skills, and he shouts the water ball spell, which instantly forms a sphere of water in his hand. The magic. It turns out to be much simpler than I imagined. Even more surprising, you can cast the same spell just by visualizing the water sphere, so saying the summoning is not really necessary now. Confirmed that he can use magic, he goes directly to the bathroom and begins to fill the tub with water. The boat soon noticed a problem, only knows how to produce water and doesn't plan to enjoy a bath that isn't hot. So, he goes out and tries to light a bonfire to heat the water manually. The only problem is that he has no idea how to set the fire that way afterwards. Retreat, surrender, and turn back is a sign of defeat, but looking at the sun, he comes up with an idea. Rio takes a bucket, fills it with water, and begins to concentrate on it. While compressing it while extracting the heat, little by little the ice begins to form with a little more. The effort and practice manages to mold the ice into a kind of improvised magnifying glass. Using it, he uses the sunlight to start a fire, and finally, with the fire lit, heats up your bathroom. It was full of frozen water at the end of his first day. He can finally relax and enjoy a good soak. Now that he has mastered the creation of ice, Rio realizes that it should also be possible if you can eliminate the heat to freeze the water. You should also be able to add heat to create warm water, something you will need to practice in the following days. The next morning, while Rio eats breakfast, he begins to reflect. With only 2 months of food provided by Michael, he knows that he will soon have to hunt to replenish. But he doubts that a simple knife is enough to defend himself from the monsters of the forest, so he decides to start practicing his offensive magic. His first attempt is to put a water ball on a tree, exactly as he imagined it, but a small splash will do us much good in a real fight. I remember a way to increase the force of the water, so 1 ball, this time compressing it to a more concentrated point to increase the pressure. The idea is good, but it's still not strong enough. Its jet of water barely has more power than a toy water gun. Remember something that Michael mentioned to him before his reincarnation? Magic depends largely on the imagination. The clearer the image in your mind, the better the result, and continue to perfect it with a lot of practice. After several days of continuous training, the river water flowers begin to take shape and look decent. They are still far from being powerful enough to defeat a monster. Our protagonist has also discovered how to produce hot water, allowing you to enjoy warm baths whenever you want. However, you are still working on adjusting temperature, as your control is not entirely accurate. The next morning, he decides to practice his ice magic once again. This time he tries to conjure ice directly from the air, although it is difficult and it takes almost 3 minutes to form it. Finally, he manages to create ice out of nothing. However, unlike water, it is much more difficult for him to throw it easily in the training.
Combat hasn't gone very well so far. None of the spells that Rio has come up with have had much impact yet.
And he spends the next few hours striving, practicing non-stop until he finally collapses due to malnutrition. The fact that he has reached his limit on that day, he decides to stop. But the next morning, as soon as he recovers all his mana, he immediately returns to training. Pine becomes the daily life of Rio over the following weeks. Thanks to all your effort, you can now create instant ice. Holding it in a reliable offensive spell with its new set of attack magic finally ready and with its provisions beginning to exhaust, Rios ventures into the forest for the first time. To hunt, He quickly notices a trail of animal traces and decides to follow it, which takes him to a nearby river while the area is found with a bit of quartz on the bank of the river, something you can use to light a fire by hitting it against the edge of your sword as well. He took the opportunity to collect some detoxifying herbs in case he needs them later. But suddenly a deep growl rumbles behind him.
When he turns around, he meets face to face with a minor boar and the boar is paralyzed.
He charges against Rio, but since this is his first life or death battle, he panics. In the last second, he reacts and jumps to the side, narrowly digging the attack of the beast. However, the pavilion is finished. He turns ready to attack again. Luckily, Rio's mind clears in short time while the cavalry throws towards him, quickly creates an icy path under his hooves, making him slip without wasting a second. He summons several ice spikes directly in the wild boar's path, pouring it and killing it instantly. After depleting the wild boar, Rio pulls out the monster guide to learn more about it. According to the book, the minor boar is actually the weakest monster in that forest. The guide is clearly designed for beginners. I know that most of the creatures listed are quite simple. However, towards the end of the book, Rio notes 2 additional pages that stand out, seem to contain something important. One of the pages describes dragons, immensely powerful creatures, capable of destroying entire cities by themselves. The guide. He highly recommends that you run away immediately if you ever encounter one, as looter against him would be useless. In fact, that's not very likely to be able to flee from a dragon either, so finding one is basically the end of the game. Another page mentions a mysterious being called Akuma, apparently a fallen angel guy. However, the book offers very little information about them. The only advice he gives is simple: if you ever bump into one, you're already dead. The next day our protagonist goes out again to hunt, but in the meantime, he has his guard down. A giant assassin descends from the sky and launches a surprise attack. The creature uses wind magic to cut its prey with sharp cuts like a river, has no choice but to flee by quickly summoning ice shields to block the wind blades that are coming at him. He knows that falcons are extremely dangerous opponents and would prefer to avoid fighting, but escaping is not an option. That means his only exit now is to stand up and counterattack. He raises his hand and throws a series of water jets, but the falcon skillfully dodges the attack and throws himself on it using wind magic to hit rivers. However, it reacts at just the right time, forming an ice shield that cuts the falcon in the eye and causes it to crash into the ground. Moments later, the falcon regains consciousness. Although it has lost an eye permanently, it flies to the sky to retreat, but before disappearing, it gazes with Rio one last time, engraving its face in the memory, because now it is personal. Our protagonist sighs relievedly, grateful to have come out alive. Still, this is far from the quiet life he had imagined during the pursuit of the hawk. He ran so deep in the forest that he ended up completely lost, wandering until it became night. While searching for the way back home, he unexpectedly runs into a shining lake, and right in the middle of the lake, there is an undulation, and by its expression, the creature has already noticed it. In time, he perfected his abilities through constant training, mastering the art of hunting and conserving most difficult food. His water magic has become considerably more powerful. You can now summon sharp ice sheets as blades, and make them fall instantly. Even their jets of water have reached a new level by easily cutting solid stone. At this point, his combat skill becomes formidable. However, ice magic isn't the only thing Rio has been practicing since his encounter with Dulwich has gone out into the forest every night to face it. Interestingly, the monster guide never mentioned Dulwich. Either they are not classified as monsters or are too advanced for a beginner's manual. The Rio form is determined to face it, charges with his ice cane and begins to launch attacks, treating the match more as a training session than as a real battle. The Dao completely surpasses it in both power and technique. Rio does his best to defend himself by summoning ice shields to block the approaching blows, but despite his efforts, he is quickly overcome and knocked down in a matter of seconds. Although the Dowry has never said a single word, Rio can't help but feel that he has adopted the role of a mentor, trying to mold it into someone stronger. Suddenly, the Dulwich lifts his sword and channels water magic to lengthen the leaf. Our guy is surprised to discover that he can also use water magic. After showing him how the technique works, the Dulwich hands the sword to Rio and moves quietly towards the lake. One day, while Rio is hunting, he is ambushed by the same assassin falcon from the previous encounter. Don't remember that it was black before. It must have evolved, striving to strengthen itself only for this moment of revenge. The falcon rushes over the river, unleashing a rain of wind cuts in response. Rio quickly conjures 5 layers of ice walls to protect itself, but now that the falcon has evolved, its wind attacks are much more powerful, enough to destroy all of Rio's defenses instantly, and now a wave of anxiety begins to take over it. Rio runs through the field, lifting ice walls to protect itself from the attack. When he sees an opening, he responds with a barn of ice bars, but the falcon easily dodges, advancing with a sudden burst of speed, and that is not the only thing the falcon has prepared. He throws a sharp scream at a frequency that interrupts Rio's magic, causing his ice shields to disappear and leaving him practically defenseless, but the falcon is not finished, remains suspended in the threatening air in front of him, and Rio feels that a great attack is coming, although he cannot predict when moments. Well, our protagonist feels electricity in the air as a lightning is fired directly towards him. An attack like that would have been fatal, but luckily he managed to use a lightning rod and jump to the side to save himself. While Rio struggles to recover from the impact, the concealer again, ready to hit the final blow with his sharp claws in the last one. In an instant, Rio summons his ice sword and deflects attack, and they swap several more blows. But Rio remembers his intense training with dullage in detecting an opening in the falcon's defense. He sinks his sword directly into his neck. As the falcon crashes into the ground, Rio walks slowly towards him, feeling a kind of understanding. Do you know how? The falcon lost an eye because of it and has since been driven by the need to prove that it was stronger, struggling to evolve. But Rio has also been working hard to become stronger, and in the end, despite everything, the falcon was defeated. After that, River begins to return home, but to his complete surprise, a dragon suddenly appears in front of him, remembering what the book said about dragons being invincible. He is convinced that this is his end, but to his surprise, the dragon speaks to him through telepathy. He seems aggressive, absolutely. In fact, he explains to him that he is just passing by looking for a black hawk that passed through the area. The dragon simply wants to know if Rio has seen him nearby, relieved that the dragon is not hostile. Rio is. Quickly, he must be talking about the falcon he has just defeated, nervously apologizes and explains that the falcon was touched first and that he had no choice but to defend himself and kill him. The dragon is shocked to know that a human like a River was able to defeat a falcon, although it doesn't seem particularly annoying about it, which really, it captures his attention is the sword that Rio carries with him, immediately recognizes him as King Ada's sword, so that King Ada has entrusted such a weapon to a simple boy. Rio must have done something to win his favor. The dragon has taken appreciation for him, and Rio, who still doesn't know much about this world, hopes to be able to ask him some questions. Finished chatting for several hours until late at night, but his talk is eventually interrupted when the dragon says he should return home. Rio thanks him for answering his questions, and the dragon also thanks him, wishing it's been a long time since he had such an interesting conversation. They say goodbye, but in the meantime, in heaven, Michael reviews the documents related to Rio's reincarnation when he suddenly notices something he had missed. It turns out that Rio was given a hidden trait, something that Michael hadn't seen since he sent a girl into that world 10,000 years ago. In the case of Rio, the trait is eternal youth, and Miguel considers it quite unusual.
He heads to the beach with a craving for roasted seafood with salt, but he is surprised to see a gigantic shipwreck. He notices the corpse of a man, which saddens him, but suddenly he hears the faint of another man. Feeling relieved and happy, he realizes that someone is still alive. Abel remembers how the ship was destroyed by a giant sea monster. As he wakes up,
he is surprised to find himself alive, looks around and sees his belongings next to the bed, so he grabs his sword and leaves the house. Rio arrives and greets him. He is surprised that he has not been able to perceive his. Due to the way Rio is dressed, he assumes that he doesn't have any other clothes, but he quickly realizes that he shouldn't think badly of the man who saved him. He introduces himself and thanks Rio for saving him, but our protagonist mentions that he only took him home, so there is no need to thank him. He gives him the sad news that, unfortunately, no one else survived. Abel realizes that the bodies, they must also have been dragged to the shore. It reveals that they were all smugglers, so Rio doesn't have to worry about them, but this leaves Rio shocked. However, before Abel can say anything more, his stomach roars of hunger, so Rio invites him to lunch while they eat. Abel learns that Rio has no clothes, which surprises him, so he
questions why he doesn't buy new clothes. But soon he realizes that since Rio doesn't have money, he can't acquire what is necessary. He thinks he may have offended him, but Rio mentions that there is no town nearby, so he can't just go shopping for clothes. Amel deduces that he must have gotten the food hunting, which impresses him and wonders if Rio uses the knife to hunt. But Rio reveals that he only uses it for self-defense and to clean up what he hunts. Since he uses water magic to hunt, Abel is impressed that even in the central provinces, only half of the population can use magic and he's part of those who can't. Rio remembers that Michael told him that the percentage of magic users is 20%, but Abel can't understand his murmuring, so Rio tells him it's nothing then. Isabel asks Rio to take him to the Costa, as he wants to confirm something on the way. He asks Rio if he needs a staff, as he is a magician, but Rio tells him that he doesn't have one, which leaves Abel shocked and thinks that Rio is too poor to buy it. He tells Rio that if they get into trouble, he should go to the front, but Rio refuses. Abel insists that it is the minimum he can do, otherwise his reputation will be tainted for always being the one who was rescued, so Rio reluctantly agrees. When they reach the shore, they are surprised to see that the bodies are no longer there. Rio thinks that maybe the monsters ate them or the water dragged them again. Luciano Abel reflects that if Rio hadn't saved him, he would have had the same fate, so he's grateful to be alive. Our prota says that he must be very lucky and Abel agrees. Then Abel mentions that he feels it's rare that the man who saved his life is calling him a lord. Although Rio believes that Abel is older than him, as he has asked him, he agrees to call him by his name. This makes Abel happy, as all his friends call him Rio Susser. It depends on Abel considers him his friend, but while thinking about it, Abel informs him that he couldn't find what he was looking for. Rio then asks him what he plans to do now. So, Abel says he needs to find his friends somehow, and the first step is to get to the town of Loom, though Rio has never been there. He thinks he's in the north and they'll have to cross that side of the island. Vale then has an idea and decides to recruit him as his guide. Rio agrees with the condition that they give at least one day to make his preparations. Rio realizes that he won't be able to continue with his dream of living a quiet life that night. When Abel tells him that he needs to say goodbye to someone, Abel is surprised, as it's too late, but Rio mentions that that person is only available at that time. When he leaves, Abel remembers that Rio previously said that no one else lived around, but he thinks that maybe he can pay homage to someone and that Daz was always alone on the island, but it's still not his job to meddle in Rio's personal affairs. Sometime later we see that Rio has actually gone to say goodbye to Jalajan, telling him that he will go to Rondo Forest for a while, but he, grateful for the training he received that allowed him to survive, he knows that he will be out for a long time, so he decides to use all his power in his last training session. Rio carries all his strength, but Jalajan easily deflects all his attacks, leaving him exhausted before he leaves. Jalajan gives him new clothes, which makes Rio very happy, who promises to use it with pride the next day. The customer finally begins their journey and Rio puts on his new outfit that fits him perfectly, but on the way they soon encounter a wild boar, so Abel says to stay behind and watch. He charges the wild boar and Abel activates a combat ability called Total Drilling, which created a hole in the animal's abdomen, giving him on the spot, which impresses Rio. He wonders what kind of skill that is? So Abel thinks that a magician like him must have seen her for the first time, but that it is very common among swords and other people who fight with weapons. The next morning, while continuing on her journey, Abel hears a sound and notices two lizards in the swamp. Abel thinks they will be difficult to face in the water, so they decide to take another route to avoid them. Moving forward on the alternative path, Rio feels that lizard men are following them. He informs Abel, who realizes that he has no choice but to fight. Rio tells him that there are many, so he will use his magic to eliminate them. Abel remembers that he doesn't have his staff, but Rio simply recites a spell and kills them all with his ice needles, leaving Bele in shock. Together, they eliminate all the lizard men after the fight. Bele asks him about the spell, noting that the wind wizards he knows can only cast a summoning spell. He wants maybe the water magic to work differently before resuming the trip. Rio uses magic to summon water and thus stay hydrated. However, Abel notes that he used a different enchantment than before, which nervous to Rio and quickly changed the subject, saying that Abel must be imagining things after walking for a while. Abel gives a coin to Rio and he is surprised to see it, as it is the first time he has seen the money of this world. Abel explains that it is a bronze florin used in the kingdom of Knightly, where Lon. In addition, he clarifies that in the central provinces each print has its own currency, but they all use the same denominations, and Knightly is one of the three main nations, being the other two, the Budgie Empire and the Haidalu Federation. The name Budgie is a bit strange, so let's see if he has any problems with that nation. Our protagonist clarifies that it only seems like a somewhat unusual name. He explains that the name of a nation is very important to his people, as they must show up everywhere, saying that they are from Budgie. As if it sounds weird, Rio admits that he wouldn't want to show up like that, and Abel thinks he's exaggerating a bit after a while. They finally get out of the forest, but as they walk, Abel notices that a rock is moving, so he prepares to attack, but Rio creates an ice wall that blocks the rock. He points out that they are surrounded as he has found a rock golem's nest, but Rio is surprised to see them, as he always thought they were humanoid, with arms and legs. Abel tells Rio to stay where he is as he runs towards the golems, but his total drilling attack has no effect, as the golems regenerates quickly, which leaves him shocked. Rio tells him he wants to try an attack, so Abel tells him to get ahead of Rio, creates layers of walls of ice together and drops them on the golem to immobilize him. Abel is impressed to see such a powerful magic, but Rio calmly mentions that he has only eliminated 2 golems so far and plans to do the same with the others soon. They dig with most of the golems and there is only one left, but surprisingly it doesn't move, so Rio thinks that maybe they get his magic from the earth, and since it's turned over, he can't absorb it. Right then, Abel notices a great magic stone attached to his bottom, which makes him happy, although he wished he could collect it from the others as well, but unfortunately it won't be possible anymore. Along the way, the duo notices a giant hippo sleeping and Rio wonders if Abel wants to kill him, but Abel doesn't have such ambitions. He reveals that he has never seen him in person, but that he looks like a Bajaman. Suddenly, he notices that several wyverns are approaching, which excites Rio, as they will be able to witness a battle of monsters in the front row. Abel, he thinks that the Bajamant is at a disadvantage, but Rio believes that they won't fall so easily. When the Winders start attacking, the Bajamant rises and shouts a deafening scream that knocks them down, making it fall to the ground. Rio explains that he used magic cancellation at night while they light the fire to prepare the food. Rio jokes that he was expecting a fight between Abel and the Bajamant, but Abel tells him that it's not going to happen. He mentions that he has heard of cheating in dungeons with similar effects, but never. He has seen the cancellation of magic in action. When he hears the word dungeon, Rio gets excited and sometimes asks if he wants to know more about them. Rio says he would like to visit a dungeon himself, so Bele says that there is only one in the central provinces and luckily he is in the town he is heading to. Rio jokes, asking why Abel has hidden that information, which makes Abel get defensive, saying that he didn't know he was so interested in the dungeons. Rio keeps bothering him by asking him if he has hidden more important information, so today he asks if he knows the elves and dwarves. Our protagonist says no, so Veli reports that the dwarves are blacksmiths, experts, and good fighters, and that Lewin has some. He also explains that there is only one elf in Lewin while the rest live in the forests, where they never go out, so Rio thinks it's fair as he had imagined. But Abel doesn't believe it, as he has never left the island. The next day, Rio continues to guide the path and reveals that on the other side of the mountain they will find a human settlement. Abel wonders how he got that information, so Rio, he remembers how the dragon told him everything, tells Abel that it's better not to know and calls his source of knowledge something beyond human understanding. As they walk, suddenly they feel like something is coming from behind. At this moment a giant tap appears, leaving his shock, paralyzed by fear. But Rio quickly pulls a piece of meat out of his sack and throws it into the air. The tap catches him and flies away. Both feel relieved to have survived. Abel comments that he was completely paralyzed, while Rio admits that he was. If they've tried to fight, they probably wouldn't have made it. Let's see, think they're not made to face monsters like that, and notice that there haven't been many reports of encounters with Bajamans or Griffos in centuries, so he thinks something is wrong with this place. Arayo finds it a bit rude and thinks that maybe humans aren't looking enough. So Abel believes that maybe these frozen mountains have kept the beasts out of human territory. As they walk, Rio suddenly remembers that the wyverns who attacked the Behemoth came from the direction they are now heading. Soon he sees some wyverns devouring their prey, and Abel points out that they can't face them, as they are normally needed. There are around 20 adventurers experienced to knock down only one, and yet there are usually lows. Rio thinks that if they even try to avoid them, they will probably find more along the way and they won't be able to dodge the fight forever. Rivers, where it will be easier to face them while they are on the ground, and Abel agrees, thinking that he will be able to use his sword more effectively. And then, Rio goes ahead to confront them, summons several ice spears to stab the wyverns, and Abel finishes off with his total piercing technique. However, the screams of the wyverns attract more of their kind. Our Rhoda uses an ice attack from above to make them fall, and Abel quickly eliminates them. After the battle, he collects the magic stones. Abel admits that he can't believe how easy it was, while Rio wonders if Abel wanted a battle due to death just to feel adrenaline. At the moment, another flock of wyverns arrives and the two prepare to fight, knowing that they have no choice but to beat them to keep moving forward. After successfully defeating them all, they reach the top of the mountain and are filled with joy when they see a human settlement on the other side. After giving up to so many wyverns, Rio feels confident and thinks it wouldn't bother to meet more of them. But Abel thinks that's ridiculous because it would be better if he never ran into those dangerous creatures again. Abel admits that it was surprising how they managed to gather so many magic stones from the Weimers, but suddenly he stops talking when he realizes that they have traveled quite a bit to the north, although Abel has no idea where exactly ended up. River, somewhat nervous, hopes that they haven't accidentally entered Buji's empire, but Abel quickly calms him down, telling him that this is not the case, since the empire is much northerly. Rio feels relieved, which makes Abel curious to know why he hates that place so much. Master Plota tells him he doesn't have nothing personal against the Empire, but he simply dislikes the name, which seems quite strange to him. Right at that moment, Rio notices a path that crosses the landscape and Abel observes that it goes from east to west, so he looks around carefully and recognizes the area. Rio sees him thoughtful and asks him if everything is fine, but Belle explains that if they follow the path to the west, they will soon arrive in the town of Kaylady. And if Rio gets excited because he really wants to sleep in a real bed, but Abel remembers that he wanted to keep fighting against more wyverns, Rio quickly explained that those are two completely different things. Abel mentions that in the town of Kaylady, it's delicious and he insists that he must try it. This makes Rio even more excited to visit that new town. A while later, they arrive in Kaylady and head to a nearby tavern. Sitting there, Abel suggests that Rio should register with the Adventurer Guild, but Rio has no idea what that means. Abel explains that the registration in the guild will serve as an identification, allowing him to enter different towns and countries without having to. Abel says that when they arrived in town, he was their guarantor and paid a silver coin as an entry fee. But Rio jokingly asks him if that was part of a cunning plan to turn him into his servant. Abel is still trying to convince Rio to join the guild by explaining that they can sell magic stone monster materials for a good price, otherwise, Rio would have to become an alchemist to be able to use those things, which would be a big mess. Isn't the Prota surprised that alchemy exists in this world? But it is. Even more so when the waiter brings his dish of rice with curry to the table. He thinks to himself that in most stories and that the protagonist has to travel a lot to find curry, but somehow it already exists in this world. So Rio says it's nothing and tastes his first bite, but it's so tasty that he can't help but devour it in seconds. Rio asks for another dish and asks Abel if they have a curry like that in the town of Lewin. Abel confirms that it does, and he is happy that Rio liked it and admits that it was quite tasty. Even the next day, leaving the village, Rio continues to praise the curry they ate the night before and asks Abel to tell him about the best desserts at the place. Abel is confused and doesn't know how to respond, so he just says that he will think about it, continue their journey, and after spending a few days walking, they finally see the town of Luna in the distance. Upon arriving at the gates of the city, the guard recognizes Abel and says that everyone was there. As he had been missing for months, ABA explains that he managed to return safely thanks to the Rio. The guard gives Rio a handshake with enthusiasm, grateful that he saved his friend. Abel pays the entrance fee, acting once again as his guarantor. The guard then asks if they will go directly to the guild and mentions Abel's friends are out of town at the moment, but when they come back they will get a big surprise to see him. Once inside the city, Abel suggests that you go directly to the guild to register Rio as an adventurer, as he can help you move up the rank. Rio has. What does that mean? Abel explains that new adventurers usually start in the F rank, but with the recommendation of someone of the higher BO rank they can start in the EO rank. Even D. Rio quickly realizes that means Abel must be in a rank higher than AB, which makes him proud. While Abel is, he gets shy and changes the subject quickly. Abel goes on to explain that the highest ranks allow you to access better missions, which means better rewards. He recommends going up the rank, although he adds that Rio probably won't have to worry about money anyway, as he will earn a lot selling the magic stones of the wyverns. And questions in those magic stones are really so valuable, and Abel explains that they are actually quite rare to sell them all at once. It could even cause a collapse in the market, but trust that the guild will know how to handle the situation. They finally arrive at the guild, where Nina is surprised to see that Cable is still alive. Soon, all the adventurers gather around her and Rio realizes that Cable is quite popular. Rio thinks she should give them some space and leaves the guild to take some fresh air. Just at that moment, an elf girl passed by him and she noticed that Rio was wearing the outfit of the Fairy King. She mentioned that must have impressed the Fairy King a lot. Rio can't respond well, so she says he's in a hurry and maybe they'll meet again one day and leaves a while later. Abel takes Rio back into the guild, where he tells everyone that he survived only thanks to Rio, who will soon register as an adventurer. Abel hopes that everyone will take care of him. Rio feels it is happy to be the center of attention while others praise him for saving Abel. Soon after, we see the process of registering Rio, and Abel says he wants to recommend him to the rank of, but Nina is surprised, as it is the first time that someone in her group recommends an adventurer. Abel says that Rio has a lot of talent, but Nina replies that she has no problem with that, although according to the rules they must present any kind of physical test of his strength. Abel says he will hope to be able to speak with the guild's teacher about it, so Nina will inform him of the request while they wait in the meeting room. When Nina gives him the good news, the guild arrives immediately, eager to see, skilled with his own eyes, as he had been very worried about him. Then he notes Rio and introduces himself as Hook McGlass, the master of the Guild of Lewin. He thanks Rio for what makes him something uncomfortable, and Rio simply replies that he was only in the right place at the right time. He tells Hyuk that he wants to recommend Rio for a promotion in the rank, so Hyuk asks for the required test. Abel assures with total confidence that Rio is actually stronger than him. Abel shows them the magic stones and Hyuk realizes that his green color means that elementals of wind because of their size and intense brightness. He suspects that they could be from wyverns, which Hubel confirms. Hyuk is shocked. He finds it hard to believe that they managed to gather so many, since normally to face that amount of wyverns it would take an entire army. Or because without monsters to attack the city, they could completely destroy it, but reassure him, since they met those creatures far south of the Malvik Mountains. Rio is surprised to hear that name. Can you tell that before, when they found K-Lady's Way, he realized where they were? Hyuk reveals that it is said that no one has crossed those mountains alive and not even the experienced adventurers go there unless they have a good reason. Hyuk can't believe that they defeated all of those wyverns on their own. But now that he has seen the physical test, Rio's skills have no objections regarding the request for promotion. Suddenly, Abel's group, the Crimson Sword, arrives at the guild. Abel is going to reunite with his father friends, while Rio is about to finish the rest of the registration process. Upon entering the guild's teacher's office, Rio begins to wonder if he really deserves the rank of. Google explains, although Abel is very talented, not even he can defeat a wiring alone, so if Rio helped beat several, he must have exceptional talent. While Hug pats him on the back to congratulate him, he is surprised by how strong he feels Rio's body to be a magician. At that moment, Nina arrives with the papers and introduces herself properly before starting Rio's registration. She begins the brief interview by asking her his name and confirming that he is a magician. Then she asks him what his magical element is, and he tells him it is water. When I ask him where he lives, Rio explains that he has just arrived in the city. Nina reports that during the first 300 days after joining the guild, she is allowed to stay in the guild's accommodations. Nina asks him if he has ever been in a dungeon and he admits that he has not. So she talks to her about a monthly introductory course on dungeon exploration, which offers a complete guide for new adventurers and tips on what to keep in mind. When Nina asks her if she is interested, Rio replies excitedly yes. She already informs him that the next course starts in 2 days and says that she will register. Nina tells her that she must show up in the meeting room on the 3rd floor at 9 a.m. that day. When Rio is surprised, Nina adds that there is a clock in the city so that she can control the time with that. Nina performs the paperwork, but Rio gets confused when she says that it is time to start the actual registration. She asks her. He placed his hand on a glass and the device instantly creates his guild card, which he then gives to him. Nina congratulates him on officially becoming a registered adventurer. When he comes out, Hugh feels relieved because he was really worried about Abel, as the situation seemed pretty serious in his absence. He thinks he would never want to go through something like this again, which makes him thank even more Rio for saving everyone. Remember, he hasn't informed anyone yet about Abel's return, so immediately grabs his communication device to make a call. Meanwhile, Abel takes Rio for a walk, and when Rio asks him where they are going, Abel tells him that they are going to pick up his rewards for helping him return to the village. Abel mentions that he wants to buy him new clothes and a bag of ours, but he admits that he doesn't understand why Abel keeps mentioning a baby. Abel explains why he's a magician, but Rio tells him that he can throw magic without the need of one and that he can also use his hand-to-hand combat sword. Abel is surprised to hear that and asks about the sword, so Rio shows it. However, Abel thinks it looks more like a knife than a real sword. If anything, he's hurt Rio's feelings, but Rio doesn't bother him at all. Instead, he asks Belle for help, as there are still more things he doesn't know about this world. Rio soon learns that a day here lasts 24 hours, a week has 7 days, and a month has 30 days, basically the same as on Earth. He's surprised to discover that clothes are also measured in centimeters. It seems too much of a coincidence, and Rio begins to wonder if there could be some kind of connection. Maybe someone else reincarnated this world before him, which would explain why so many things are the same to his native planet. Afterwards, Abel invites him to his party where Rio is the guest of honor and presents him to everyone as his savior in the morning. Nina walks with him and asks her if she had fun the night before. Rio says yes, but admits that he is a little exhausted. Soon they arrive in the guild's dormitories, and when they enter the room, he sees a boy doing push-ups. When she notices Nina's presence, she gets nervous. She tells them Rio will be his new roommate, and the two introduce themselves as Niels and Ito. After reminding Rio of his class, Niels comments on how beautiful he is while Ito says they should stop being so formal among each other. Then, Nina returns with another newcomer who will also join them as a roommate. Ito thinks the new guy looks pretty young, and Amon confirms that he is barely 16 years old. Sadly, after losing his parents, becoming an adventurer was his only option to make a living. Nina tells him Rio will also take the basic dungeon course with him, so they will have to go together, which they both agree. Meanwhile, Abel's friend, Lin, can't believe a wizard could create a thick ice shield. Thinks they're usually too thin and they can. Breaking with something as simple as a wind cut, she also insists that using it in the air to attack an enemy is completely impossible. But Abel says that Rio did exactly that. Lynn explains that magic can usually only be wizard near the sorcerer, so none of that makes sense to her. Still, the priestess says that Abel is saying all of that, then, must be true. However, Lynn fears that if Rio ever turned against them, it would be a big problem, or if he joined the kingdom as an enemy. Abels assures that it will never happen when asked how he can be so sure. He explains that it is why Rio hates the name of the kingdom. And the next river is taking dungeon classes. The instructor announces that they have finished the introductory lessons on the exploration of dungeons. This afternoon they will venture on the first floor of a dungeon. Amon is quite nervous about that idea, so
I advise not to press yourself too much or exhaust your energy before you even start exploring. The instructor asks if anyone has any doubts. Rio raises his hand and asks if there is any way to travel instantly to a level of dungeon that has been cleared by the impressive question instructor, although he explains that only certain dungeons in the provinces from the south they have that function. He adds that as far as he knows, that type of dungeons do not exist in the moon, since he has only heard of them from rumors. Amand is impressed by knowledge of Rio and thinks it's not surprising that he reached the range of, but Rio quickly changed the subject by saying that I only hear it from someone else in the afternoon. While the new adventurers are getting ready, they learn that the city is essentially built around the dungeon. They inform them that every certain years the number of monsters inside increases drastically in an event known as the Great Tide.
He adds that during that period some monsters can reach the surface, which is why the city has double walls for protection. Does Rio realize that the outer wall is designed to protect the city from external threats? While the interior serves to defend it from the monsters coming from the dungeon, Amon, who is already nervous, thinks it all sounds like a potential mess, but the instructor reassures him, saying that only happens once every several years and insists that for now they have nothing to worry about. When he enters the dungeon, the river doesn't say that we love, it's still tense, so he tries to calm him down by telling him that they're all together in this, so there's nothing to worry about. The instructor tells them that on the first floor there are no dangerous monsters, so they can freely explore the initial area as they walk. A little more, see something and stop. Rio tells Mun that he will keep him immobilized with his ice magic and that he takes advantage of the opportunity to attack. They soon run into a soldier and Rio remembers that in the Pensy guide,
it is mentioned that the easiest way to kill her is by hitting the base of her neck. So he throws 8 ice spears to mobilize her and tells him to come closer and finish it. Amon throws himself forward and, standing close to the ant's neck, gives him a powerful attack that cuts him off with one blow, which makes him feel very confident with his skills.
In response, Rio tells him that he picks up the magic stone as a trophy of his first expedition. I love a question if that's allowed, and Rio explains that, as adventurers, it's natural to pick up magic stones. After all, it is. When they finally manage to dig up the stone, they both feel proud and happy about its success. That night they return to the guild to celebrate their first visit to the dungeon and their first victory. Nils comments that he would like to be able to drink some alcohol, but Edo explains that the guild is useless.
Alcoholic beverages, and that they are not allowed to be brought from outside either. He believes it's probably a measure to prevent adventurers from drinking. Nils argues that the rules are too strict, as they are just celebrating their achievement. Edo changes the subject,
saying that he is impressed that they managed to beat an ant soldier on his first excursion to the dungeon. Ammonius thinks they only made it because Rio immobilized the ant by giving him the opportunity to attack. But Rio praises Ammonius' skill with the sword and tells him not to minimize his abilities. Nils is glad they got the magic stone while Ito asks what they plan to do the next day. Ammonius says he wants to go back to the mud, but he doesn't feel safe running alone, so he's not all convinced. Rios offers to accompany him and suggests that they try to get to the 3rd floor, which Ammonius enthusiastically accepts. Our protagonist finds it strange that an ant appeared in the 1st floor, and Nils mentions that usually only bats are found there. Ito tells them that in recent months there have been reports of ants appearing on the 1st and 2nd floors. The Rivers wonder why they're there. Suddenly, Abel approaches from behind and joins the conversation, asking that the ants can excavate them until they reach the 1st floor. Rio thinks that veteran adventurers shouldn't appear out of nowhere in front of rookies, especially if they're friends. They are clearly scared, but Abel says he's just sharing a little bit of expert knowledge to help them relax. Abel tells his classmates in Rio's room that, although he is strong, he has some personality problems, so they should take care of him. Rio CC. People who shouldn't be bothering them in this way when they realize that Abel is the Crimson Sword group, nor does he get up suddenly, proudly saying that he is a sort of F rank and that Abel is his hero. He asks him. They can shake hands and Abel gladly accepts, which fills Niels with joy. Then Abel advises them not to try too hard, reminding them that surviving is the #1 priority of every adventurer. Niels promises that he will remember it, but Rio can't help but wonder why Abel arrived so late to the guild. Abel explains that his last mission was more difficult than expected and that it took them longer to complete it and that they had just returned, but then his classmates appear and are surprised to see, since they were supposed to report to the teacher of the guild. Abel invents an excuse saying he is only fulfilling he is guiding the rookies, but his friend Warren picks him up and throws it on his shoulder. Abel yells at Rio for help, but Rio replies that reporting the mission is important and that as the leader of the group, it should be his part. Abel doesn't like that answer and jokingly calls Rio a traitor before that. Lean approaches Rio and looks at him in silence for a few seconds without saying a word. A few minutes later, Rio's friends comment impressed that they are with the Crimson Sword group. While they praise Abel, Rio doesn't understand why they're so interested. Meanwhile, while Abel is taken to the guild master, Rilla tells Lin that he shouldn't stare at people thinking about how he was observing Rio, but Lin replies that anyone would be curious after running away from Abel. Talk about him too. Then, Javi tells them not to worry, that they will soon see Rio's power for themselves. The others just think he's trying to be interesting. The next morning, Amon is excited to go back to the dungeon, but Rio reminds him to take it easy. There is no need. Hurry up. Once inside, they quickly encounter monsters. River throws ice spears at them, while Amon, feeling more confident, reacts quickly when a wolf throws itself on top of it, cutting it easily. Another wolf tries to attack him from the back, but Rio hits him with the ice spears, giving Amon the chance to finish him off with each fight. Amon feels more confident with his skills after finishing all the wolves. Rio tells him about his style, but it reminds Abel. Then he remembers that Ammon had mentioned that his teacher was a former adventurer of his village. Ammon explains that his teacher's name is Caro and that he trained in a renowned school in the capital. Master Rhoda thinks that Ammon has the potential to become a great swordsman. How skilled? Amon, on the other hand, is surprised that Rio, despite being a magician, knows so much about fencing. Rio explains that he used to train with his mentor, but since his style is original, he doesn't know if he's really good at it. We asked him if he's ready to continue exploring. Amo, he says so, but Rio thinks he should rest a little more, as his combat style still seems quite exhausting. He suggests that he start running regularly to improve his stamina and remember how skillful he trained from very early in the morning. Rio adds that even the most talented adventurers have to practice a lot, which motivates Amon to demand even more. The next day, Rio heads to the library in hopes of learning more about alchemy. The receptionist gives him some introductory books. One is a beginner's guide, the other is a recipe book full of useful information. After finishing reading, Rio thinks he will need his own copies if he wants to take alchemy seriously, although he wonders how much it will cost him. Suddenly, the whole town is left in the dark when an eclipse covers the sky, but something feels weird, as if everyone has changed. Rio perceives. He sees someone behind him and quickly summons multiple layers of ice monkeys just in time to block a fire attack from an unknown enemy. When the dust is set, Rio sees a demon girl. The demon seems surprised that a human has been wrapped up in this, although he adds indifferently that it doesn't matter. He is going to kill him soon by force of his attack. Rio realizes that it is Akuma. He knows he should run away, but he is not sure that he escapes. It is even an option in such a situation. The Kuma forms a huge fireball, and Rio again invokes multiple ice walls. However, he notices that they are not resisting as well as before. The barrier with an explosion and fires a wind bullet at it, but Rio manages to dodge it, avoiding a direct blow to the heart. She is surprised that she was able to block her infernal fire and shocks even more when she dissipates her wind spear. Then she notices in a tunic she is wearing and that she comes from King Ada. Annoyed, decides that she will have to get her hands dirty and fight hand to hand. She jumps in to snatch him, but Ryan is not willing to give up, pulls her sword and begins to block her attacks with determination. She makes fun of him for being so slow, so she responds with ice attacks, but she dodges them easily. Rio quickly realizes that he is using wind magic to move at that speed, suddenly jumps into the air and launches a powerful attack, but Rio manages to block him just in time with his sword. Our Prota thinks that as long as he stays defensive, she won't be able to hurt him. She feels that her punches don't compare to the hard training she endured with the Dulwich. She notices that she also wields the Riata's sword and begins to question what kind of being he really is. She begins to form a fire attack, but Rio says it Paco's ice throw before she can throw it. Surprised by her speed, she wonders how he can cast spells so fast and calls it a monster with incredible abilities. She realizes the danger he represents and throws it with all her power, but Rio dissipates all her attacks and makes her back down before throwing huge ice peaks in her direction. In response, she uses pure force to create 2 concrete walls from the ground, effectively blocking all her attacks. Just when the Kuma girl thinks she's completely safe, Rio launches a surprise attack from above, wounding her on the shoulder and cheek. She throws herself to take advantage, but quickly realizes that she has already healed from the damage. While he is momentarily distracted, she throws him against a nearby building. She thinks she has won the fight, but suddenly drops of water start to fall from the sky as soon as they touch her. They start to burn her skin and she screams of pain, enraged, unleashes a massive wave of blood. But fortunately for Rio, the eclipse ends. Just in time, she introduces herself as Leonor, but Rio already knows it's a coma. She's surprised that she's aware of the existence of her species, which means she should have killed him, but she knows it's impossible to beat him within the time limit. Leonor tells her to enjoy. He had the fight and hopes to see him again, but Rio doesn't feel the same. Still, Leonor insists that they will meet again because of how strong he is, even if she can't come back. He could meet others like her. This leaves Rio intrigued, realizing that there are more Akumas in El Mundo. Before leaving, she warns her not to let herself be killed, because now her life belongs to her. Leonor also hopes to be stronger the next time they meet and suddenly disappears from her sight. Rio feels relieved to stay alive and believes it was all thanks to the tunic. Otherwise, he would have a hole in his shoulder. He decides the next step is to buy these books, so you had to withdraw the money from your account. After withdrawing the money, Rio feels happy, realizing that he is quite rich after selling the wyvern stones to the guild. Thinks that he won't have to worry about working for long. But when he returns to his room, he doesn't find anyone waiting for him. He then decides to go to the bookstore to buy the alchemy books, but on the way, he suddenly sees some adventurers bothering his friends on the street. The leader, telling Rio's friends that they should always be ready for an attack, as the monsters don't warn. But before he can finish his point, Rio leaves the thugs out of combat with several precise ice cubes. His leader, Dan, gets angry and tries to hit Rio, but he easily dodges, and he hits him with the handle of his sword, so strong that he ends up vomiting. Then Rio gives his friends magic possessions to recover quickly. Still, he notices that they must be exhausted and suggests that everyone go to the hot springs to recover. Afternoon in the hot springs, Ito heals the wound of Rio's man using magic and healing. Ito is surprised that Rio has been injured despite being so strong in combat. Do you love a question? What was Eloy fighting against? But Rio avoids the question, saying he'll tell you another time when he's ready.
And among Rio's friends, they head to the dungeon and together they manage to defeat several monsters, but Amon was injured when fighting against some archer goblins, so Eddie uses minor healing to heal his wounds. Amon thanks him and Nils thinks that they barely managed to get out alive, so this adds that the archer goblins shouldn't be on the 5th floor. Niels suggests that it's time to finish the day and return to the surface, dividing their earnings among the three, as always, which surprises Ammon, since it's not. I was hoping it would come so soon. Nils says he shouldn't try fate anymore. His motto is that survival is the priority, which makes him wonder if that phrase is the Adam of Abel, Nils. He argues that it's logical to give priority to their lives and everyone agrees. Amon then thinks that if Rio had gone with them, things would have been a lot easier, but Itos points out that a team is usually made up of similar level members, and they are not at the level of Rio outside the dungeon. Rio thinks he needs to improve his skills and turn his weaknesses into strengths. He has no choice. He also remembers Leonor's incredible speed during her fight and suspects that she uses wind magic to shorten the distance, causing her some jealousy. Still, he remembers himself that it makes no sense to pursue something that you can't reach. That place should focus on what you can achieve. He wonders if he can somehow become fast using water magic, and the first spell that comes to mind is Water Jet. Remember that he used it under the water before to get off the surface, but so far he hasn't used it on dry ground. If he decides to try it, Rio creates a thick layer of ice on the ground and tries to imagine ice coming out of all points of his back to push it forward. He creates a total of 256 jets of water behind him, but he doesn't succeed, which leaves him disappointed. However, He reassures himself, saying that he is still in the process and next time he will try with more than 1,000 jets of water. He decides to visit the library to read more about the Akumas and alchemy. Meanwhile, Olin flashes through the forbidden books of spells, but fails to find any information about the spells that Abel said Rio could use. It's possible to create a thick wall of ice in the air and ice spears strong enough to pierce the defenses of a wyvern. The only explanation he comes up with is that they are original spells, but in his mind, only the Infern Wizard of the Empire is capable of creating something like this. He arrives and is surprised to see Lin there. Lin says he was looking for something, but unfortunately he didn't find it. Curious, Lin asks her if she was away, fulfilling a mission. She replies that she was sent to the royal capital and tells Lin that she should leave now. The emissary is waiting for her. Meanwhile, Niels has difficulty. Hello to talk to Nina. She comments that they came back pretty quickly, so Edo explains the archer goblins on the 5th floor. When Nina sees the magic stones, she realizes that she is telling the truth and runs out to inform the guild teacher. Thank you for sharing such important information. Nina informs Hugh about the recent discovery. He points out that these monsters shouldn't appear until after the 10th floor, so it's a serious warning sign. She asks if there are Rangobi groups currently in the city. Nina says that both the Crimson Sword and the White Brigade are in the area. Hugh asks if the main force of the brigade, led by Phelps, is present. She confirms that they returned from an expedition 2 days ago, so they should, and to be in town. Dio then tells him to summon both groups. He will receive them in his office a while later. Abel learns that the White Brigade will also come and doesn't like the idea because he doesn't know how to deal with them. But Rilla makes him see that he has known them for a long time, so he should understand each other enough. Lin thinks that Abel is always complaining and tells him that he should learn from Warren when he arrives at Hugh's office. He sees that the White Brigade is already there and Phelps greets Abel. Abel responds with his usual greeting, Hugh, who thanks everyone and assumes that Nina has already updated them, but he repeats, most importantly, they have spotted goblins archers on the 5th floor of the dungeon. Abel asks how reliable the information is, and Hugh says it's 100% confirmed. The adventurers who saw it brought the magic stones as proof. Phelps then asks what they expect them to do, and Hugh. He explains that he wants them to go into the dungeon and look for signs from a stampede, which refers to the explosive growth of the monster population. Hook explains that it's been 10 years since the last one, so it's probably time for another one soon. Rilla believes that the appearance of goblins archers on the 5th floor could be an early sign. Hugh adds that they will be paid 100 euro coins in advance and another 200 upon completing the mission. Abel asks if his only job is to confirm if it is really happening. Hugh explains, and if so, you must immediately return to the surface to leave the entrance of the dungeon and raise doubles in a joint operation between the guild and the knights of the region. He adds that he has already informed the local gentlemen about the mission and shared the defense plans. Abel thinks, that's a lot of preparation. Abel assumes that Hugh really believes the dungeon stamp has already started if he's making such detailed plans. Hugh agrees, saying it's better to be over-prepared. If it's really happening, they'll need all the available forces. He tells them they're ready, since tomorrow morning, he has already issued a notification closing the dungeon for other adventurers. Finally, Hugh questions if they are willing to accept the mission, and both groups accept the challenge with enthusiasm. The next morning, in the guild's dormitories, Rio is preparing to leave and the others are wondering where they go so early. Master Prota says he has heard that the library on the north side is very advanced, so he plans to study alchemy and secretly expects to find more information about the Akumas. Edo mentions that only D-rank adventurers are allowed to enter there, but Rio is already prepared for that. Amon then wonders if the rumors are true about the library and its banned texts. However, Edo points out that Rio needs to be of B rank in order to access it, which leaves him a little disappointed, but Niels encourages him, telling him that he will soon qualify. The others are also preparing to go to the dungeon and wish Rio luck before he leaves a little later. Rio arrives at the library, thinking that the one in the south was bigger, but he likes the atmosphere of this place. He soon sees the elf girl he met in the city a few days ago. Meanwhile, both groups arrive at the entrance of the dungeon. Abel notes that the White Brigade has only half of its members, so Philopes explains that they only brought adventurers from C or superior rank. When the guild master asks if they are ready to open the door, Abel, he has a bad feeling. Then he tells Alan that he uses his wind magic to scan the first floor. He uses magic to scan the area and sees more than 100 monsters alone on the first floor. they realize that the dumb stamp has already begun. Hugh immediately orders his men to alert the knights and close the gates of the town, as the monsters will come out at any time when. Nils, Award, and Love notice that the dungeon is closed for the day and wonders if it's related to yesterday's problem. Just at that moment, the messenger arrives and announces that the dungeon has begun. According to the emergency protocol, all adventurers must climb the walls to help stop the monsters. Meanwhile, Rio meets the Elfa girl, who presents himself as, "What will it be like?" She wonders what brought him there, and Rio says he wants to study alchemy, which she finds fascinating. He explains that he hopes to create a golem, which impresses him even more, as it is a very difficult task. Unfortunately, it will be. He doesn't know specific books about the creation of golems, but he says that there are some who could help him learn the basics. He tells Ryaha follows her and asks her if she likes to read. He says he loves it, but he hasn't been close to books for a long time. He jokes by saying that it makes it sound like decades have passed. Rio then asks her if she's an elf, to which she replies yes, and adds that she's also an adventurer of a B rank group called Wind, although she is the only member. That reminds him of Rio, what Abel said about there being only one elf in the city. It's not common for an elf to live in a human settlement, but she's happy to have done so because that led her to get to know it, and then she takes Rio to the section where she could find books about golems. Meanwhile, the city doors close while she tries to seal all access to the dungeon. That the monsters are coming, they all take their possessions. Suddenly, the dungeon's door breaks and an horde of goblins goes outside. Jupe quickly orders everyone to launch long-range attacks to weaken them. Before they get too close, they manage to contain the goblins time enough. People for the Knights of the Marquis of Lune to arrive, which gives a little relief to everyone. Hugh is glad to have spoken with Commander Nabil the day before, but still the amount of goblins is much higher than that of the last stampede 10 years ago. The guild teacher is even more concerned as the goblins continue to come out of the dungeon, slowly wearing out the adventurers and knights. Phelps tells his team to prepare for a long battle, especially since so far they have only faced goblins. Abel and his team are completely ready. He tells Lynn that he retains his man, but also clarifies that if he has any powerful spell that can change the course of the battle, don't hesitate to use it. Soon they will run out of arrows, but luckily, other adventurers arrive with more than all the arms stores in the city. Niels tells Abel, who has a message from the guild master, that there will probably be an even greater threat and he wants them to. Huda Carmen is ready to face it. Amon helps to hand out arrows while Ito focuses on healing the dead adventurers. After finally defeating most of the goblins, Hugh tells everyone that it's time to lower the wall and everyone is ready to go on the attack. Lin uses his wind magic to help them land safely while a girl, named Sheena, it creates a clay wall to block the goblins. Abel and Phelps jump over the wall and quickly remove the goblins, showing their superior abilities. Shortly after, they come across a huge goblin and realize it's General Goblin. Phelps thinks the battle will end once they defeat him, but Abe notices that there are 3 generals, which means, since the Goblin King must be close, Abel quickly develops a strategy. The Eiffel will take care of 1 goblin each, while Gorilla and Sheena take care of the 3rd. They must be quick to finish before the Goblin King appears. They bravely face the challenge, but just as they are fighting against the generals, Abel suddenly perceives something and shouts that everyone is crouching. But his wind cut hits them and Abel realizes that King Goblin was willing to sacrifice his own generals to kill them observing the battle. Hugh thinks that only Abel's magic sword and Phoebe's spear can defeat the king, but even with those weapons it seems like they are having difficulties against such a formidable opponent, with so much brute force. When Phelps is pushed back, he thinks that things don't look good for him, but Abel suddenly puts himself in front of him and throws himself against King Goblin, using his perfect shadow technique. Then he activates his total impaling technique and stabs him in the chest without. However, even after being pierced by the sword, the Goblin King doesn't fall, which leaves everyone shocked. Abel comments that he didn't expect it to be so easy. He gives the signal to Lynn and she casts a magical spell, a shower of bullets that finally knocks down the Goblin King. Everything. They are anxious to have been successful. Phillips realizes that Lynn had been preparing for his ultimate attack all the time and Abel explains that it is a very powerful spell, but it requires a long enchantment. Meanwhile, further inside the dungeon, something even more frightening is stuck behind a door. When he returns to the guild, notices that the salon is full of adventurers celebrating something, so he wonders what it is about. In the meantime, Hugh wished he could drink and relax too, but he still has a lot of paperwork to do. He says that, to top it all off, investigators will soon arrive from the real capital to conduct studies on the recent incident, and although the dungeon will remain closed for a month, he believes that the consequences of the attack will be much worse. A while later, Rio meets with his friends. Who is the? They bite the situation, finally understand why they are drinking alcohol, even though it is not normally allowed in the guild. Nels tells him excited about the mastery with Abel's sword and how he defeated King Goblin, throwing a thrust while ordering Lin to. For his ultimate spell, Ito adds that it was actually a bullet shower, one of the most powerful wind spells out there. He also comments that only Abel managed to dodge it, although he wonders how he did it just at that moment. Abel arrives and tells them that he used the perfect swordman skill,
a technique for dodging any type of attack, distance, including magic. Niels praises Abil for his heroism, but Abil insists that Niels was also excellent in his role as a supporter. He rediscovers the strange name of Perfect Shadow and Abel was already expecting him to say something like this. The conversation is interrupted by Lin and Rilla's sudden arrival. The girls annoy Abel, saying that they were already hoping to find him with Rio, as he appears to be his favorite person, although Rio suspected that they might be a bit jealous. Lin asks Rio if he can really create walls of ice in the air. He confirms that he can, up to about 40 m above the ice, which surprises her. Rilla assures that it's not easy, that it required a lot of practice, tells her that most can't do it and asks her if it was an original spell. Our product isn't sure, so she reformulates, explaining that most of the magic is launched reciting existing spells. Rio explains that spells depend on personal preference and vary from one person to another, but Lin still doesn't fully understand it. Nils then reminds Rio that the food is going to end if they keep talking, so Rio apologizes. Abel explains that according to Rio, spells are mostly a spectacle and he can throw spells without them. This leaves someone wondering how something like this is possible. The next day, Rio finds his friends gathered in front of the mission board and wonders why they are not working. She explains that the dungeon is closed, so she plans they can take a collection mission on the surface, but since there is a surplus in the market, no one is offering extraction contracts. They ask him if he is also looking for missions, but the river replies that he is looking for a type of mineral he needs for his alchemy practice. They say that it refers to magic copper ore, which is very expensive, but Rio only says that it costs 500,000 florins. Ammon notes that that's equivalent to about 50 gold coins, and Nils plummets, saying that it must be good to be so rich. Nils just laments that they can't earn anything without work, so he has an idea and decides to hire them all to collect magic copper mineral. They get ready to go to the abandoned mine near the town of Rusai. At noon on the way, Rilla offers 4 gold coins for each, no matter how much they collect, and 25 additional gold coins for each piece of mineral they find. The condition is that they avoid unnecessary dangers and return safe and sound. Rio is not asked if he is really sure, but he points out that 37 gold coins are still less than what he would pay for the ore in the city. However, since it is not a job of the guild, they will not receive credit for it. Everyone happily accepts the mission and Rio returns to their room.
Just to hear a commotion outside, she looks out the window and is surprised to see some soldiers harassing a girl, and even more so to note that the one trying to protect her is none other than Dan, the same person Rio had taught a lesson not long ago.
The knights try to take the girl, give the pull back and push them. One of the soldiers prepares to hit him, but surprisingly he loses his balance and falls. Dan himself doesn't seem to understand what happened. The knight tries to attack again, but the same thing happens. He ends up on the ground again. They wonder what's going on at this moment. Phelps suddenly appears and demands to know what the knights are doing. They tell him not to get involved, as he is just an adventurer, but he responds that he is also a noble, introducing himself as heir to the Hein Lane house.
Realizing that he is the son of the former commander of the Royal Knights, the soldiers get frightened and flee quickly. Phelps congratulates Adam for his bravery and tells him that he takes the girl with his friends. Then he goes to Rio and asks him, and it's him who Abil has praised so much. Introducing himself as the captain of the White Brigade, Phelps says that Abil had told him about him, but after seeing his magic in person, he's sure that Rio is truly powerful. Our protagonist feels nervous, so Phelps comments that the gentleman probably just slipped, trying not to reveal Rio's abilities, since we prove he really wants to keep them a secret. Abel was convinced that it had been much easier to handle the Great Tide if Rio had been there. At that moment they were interrupted by Phelps' companion, who reminds him that they are late. Before leaving, Phelps thanks Rio again for taking care of the gentleman. As they walk away, Rio notices how loud they are, but wonders why the son of a marquis works as an adventurer later that night. While Rio enjoys his dinner, Abel interrupts him and asks him why you are in. Rio alone jokes that he's not going to pay the bill and that, in fact, Abel should invite him because he's the oldest, but Abel knows how much money Rio has and refuses when the chef asks him what they want. Abel asks for the day's special. Then Rio asks him why he is just mocking that he sure plans to go to the red neighborhood later, taking a Bill by surprise. When Abel gets defensive, Rio asks him if he has a special girl and if it's Slim, but Abel says she likes Warren and then realizes that she has said more than she should. Our prota comments that it is an unusual couple, but admits that love comes in all forms and sizes. So you ask him if he's interested in Rilla, but Abe immediately turns around. Rio makes fun of him for reacting like a high school student, a term Abel doesn't understand. When Rio asks him again why he is alone, Abel decides to take him with him. He goes to the market, where Abel tells Rio that one of the researchers sent to Moon is an old acquaintance of his. It is protected by royal knights, but some of them are corrupt and have slipped away tonight. Abel's task is to locate them before they cause problems. Rio suddenly understands Abel, pointing to some hooded adventurers who don't remember seeing at Abel's welcome party. It says that they are there to explore the dungeon, but Rio reminds him that the dungeon is closed. They follow the men to an alley where one of them tries to launch a surprise tank against Rio. He blocks them easily and defeats them all with a couple of blocks of ice from above. Rio finds them disappointing, since he expected more challenge. While Abel notices an alchemy box, Rio is excited, but Abel tells him it's for research. Abel finds out that men are actually adventurers of C rank from Euclair, the capital of Handaloo, and wonders what they do there. Hand them to the city guard, Rio jokes, saying this is a weird achievement for him, but Abel replies that it's nothing new. Then Rio asks him if to show off his adventures to everyone at the party. It counts as an achievement, which makes Abel ask how he found out about it. In the meantime, while Phelps walks, the Knights of the Past try to attack him in revenge. However, they are intercepted by China, who incinerates them with their magic of fire, leaving no trace, leaving Phelps impressed later. A group of men arrives in the city and meets Hugh, who is not pleased when asked to reopen the dungeon for his investigation and to provide them with adventurers for his protection. One of the men, Clive Staples, explains that His Majesty has appointed Count Harold Lawrence Minister on Internal Affairs as the new boss of their research expedition, giving them full authority over the team while they are on the field. However, Hugh reminds them that some requests are simply unrealistic. Clive again stresses what it means to have total authority, but Hugh believes they have forgotten the meaning of what is unreasonable. His leader apologizes for the food situation and says he will make arrangements to bring supplies from neighboring cities, but Clive insists that the dungeon must be reopened. Hugh stops for a moment and then accepts, on the condition that if something happens in his city or to his adventurers, the guild will not be responsible, he adds, and firmness that if they can't accept that, the dungeon will continue to be closed, and the man accepts. The Count says they can hire adventurers at a good price, but Hukka tells him that it depends on the adventurers. Before the exploration of the dungeon begins, Hukka warns them that there are no records of hiding from the dungeon after a great tide, so you must proceed with caution. Meanwhile, Rio visits the place where Abel's group is staying and thinks that their cafeteria should be nice before. When they can enter, a girl approaches him and asks him about the guild, saying that he needs to deliver an important letter there. Rio plans to go first, but the girl insists shortly after. Rio takes her inside and she gives the letter to Abel, saying that Professor Hilarion reads it and discovers that the professor wants me to support the court mags in their investigation of the dungeon. Our prota asks if the dungeon is not closed, so Ave explains the research expedition with a worried gesture. When Rio asks him if anything worries, Ave talks about a group of rank A that has never returned, and not just any group of rank. The leader was considered a superhuman on the edge of the range, which means he has no idea what is happening inside the dungeon. After a great Maria, Rio thinks that the smartest thing to do would be to stay safe. Then he apologizes to go to eat while the girl thanks him for guiding her. Rilla asks her name and she introduces herself as Natalie Schwartkopf. Lynn recognizes her family as the famous water wizards, but Natalie says it's not a big deal. Lynn asks if she has heard of a spell that could create an ice wall a certain distance from throwing it, but Natalie hasn't heard of it either. Abel wonders why Lynn is so obsessed with river skills, but Lynn protests by saying that any wizard would be interested in learning a spell like that, right at that moment. Natalie interrupts to ask if there really is a magic like that, so they tell him that Rio is capable of doing it. As a result, Abel says that if they ever fought against Rio, not even the four of them together would be able to do it, so it's better not to even try and give up. Besides, Rio isn't the guy who would kill someone too. If you ever need help and they are not available, you can ask Rio, who is normally in room number 10 of the guild or in the library. The next morning, Abel meets with the team of researchers. Hilarion explains that the magic artifact is used to track the mana that remains in the environment. Anything you detect will be reported to the analysis team in the store. Abel shows great interest. Hilarion asks if he is starting to like alchemy. Abel replies that it is actually his friend who is interested in the subject. This surprises the old man, as he never imagined Abel as someone who had friends. On the other hand, Rio's friends return with the ore he had requested, so he generously rewards them, which makes them very happy. It's surprising that the dungeon is open again, but Riva adds that it's only for adventurers from the range onwards. Meanwhile, Aville's team continues to go deeper after 3 days. They arrive on the 7th floor without finding any monsters. Hilarion explains that the surface analysis team is checking the readings, but they haven't found anything out of the ordinary yet. Abel thinks they'll have to go deeper. Right at that moment, he notices that the researchers at University Royal Central are in a hurry, so Rilla says that they are assuming that the monsters of the Great Tide come below level 38 at the. Hugh explained that EIF rank groups can't enter the dungeon, but they can take alternative jobs by transporting food from other cities, which will require security. He adds that the White Brigade is already involved, but could use more volunteers. He asks about the color of the stones collected during the Great Maria, and he tells him they were pale, which surprises him. Meanwhile, the exploration team discovers a strange door in the dungeon. One of the researchers mentions that she might be connected to another place. Clive is delighted that his team is the first to find this door, so let everyone install the equipment and start examining it right away. They quickly have everything ready, but as soon as the magic tool knocks on the door and everyone disappears from the place in the next moment, everyone is surrounded by a dark abyss. Abel quickly calls his comrades, wondering if they are okay, and they confirm it. Then he approaches Harold and asks him what's going on. Harold responds saying that they have been moved at the same time. Cliff and his team have also been transported to another place in the dark abyss. Considering the situation, Cliff immediately orders the other adventurers to stop.
They have to stand apart and start examining their surroundings immediately. They must remain very cautious because you never know what it might look like while the others review the area. One of the adventurers is close to Clive and asks him to explain what can happen. Cliff replies that he can't guarantee it, but most likely they have been teleported to this strange place. That's why it's so important to gather information about the environment right now. Cliff believes that the door is the most likely and responsible for this. The previous theory claimed that the monsters of the Great Tide came from under the 38th floor of the dungeon, but with what is happening now, that theory has been clearly refuted. Do you think it exists? There is a great possibility that the door itself has been the true source of everything. However, while Clive thinks about it for a moment, she realizes that this could actually be a good thing. Discovering the true root of the Great Tide would be an excellent one, especially because it directly contradicts the current predominant theory. Clive smiles when he realizes that if he manages to discover something vital during this investigation, it could be enough to be promoted to AGF of the department. At that moment, one of the adventurers calls Clive, pointing behind him and saying that he hears something coming in that direction. In another place, Natalie and the other magicians are busy trying to use their magic compass to track where that group of adventurers was teleported, but they are confused because every time the magic compass gives a reading, the result disappears 1 second later. A few moments pass,
and then the compass briefly shows that the adventurers are on the 40th floor, but as fast as it appears, the reading fades again. At that moment, a man named Christopher Blood enters the room, introduces himself as one of the organizers of the investigation, and says he also acts directly under the king's orders. He asks,
"The person in charge of something unusual is happening inside the dungeon at this time." The magician in charge is hesitant to respond, but Christopher notes it. He comments that it is natural to be cautious when sharing information, as they belong to different organizations. But for now, they are only asked to share what they can to show how serious the situation has become. Christopher tells him that the adventurers who entered the dungeon just a few moments ago disappeared right in front of his eyes. Natalie and the other adventurers are shocked to hear this. Christopher contains. He was about to enter the dungeon with a group of local adventurers they had hired, but as soon as they crossed the entrance of the dungeon, the adventurers suddenly disappeared. Listen carefully and responds that his readings with the magic compass also suggest that multiple disappearances have been occurring. He explains that the last disappearance he detected occurred on the 40th floor. Christopher is surprised by this, as deeper than an adventurer. Previously, it was the 38th floor. He says that any level beyond the 30th floor represents a challenge even for the B-rank groups. Upon hearing this, the magician in charge intervenes. He says that one of the B-rank teams, the Chimson Sword, was escorting his group and firmly believes that they would still be together. Even now Natel listens, and he doesn't like what he hears, but after a few seconds of reflection, Suddenly he comes up with an idea and quickly runs to put it into practice. Meanwhile, the Megwai in charge mentions that he has already sent a messenger to the Adventurer Guild, so he expects the guild's teacher to arrive as soon as he hears the news. Afternoon, Nina arrives at the guild and tells Hugh that something went terribly wrong in the dungeon. The entire investigative team suddenly disappeared without a trace. He also explains that Christopher, the dean of the magic school, is asking for that. Hugh goes immediately to the entrance of the dungeon. Upon hearing that, Hugh starts sweating, wondering if that disappearance also includes Abel and his group. Without wasting a second more, he stands up and declares that he will depart immediately. He orders Nina to keep the rest of the staff on hold and take his coat while telling her to gather his ties at the entrance of the dungeon.
However, he makes it clear that the guild's adventurers do not yet need to know any details. Instead, he tells Nina to simply inform them that he will explain everything once he confirms the truth of the situation. Meanwhile, he sees Rio entering the city's huge library because he needs, after consulting some very important books, but soon after, he feels overwhelmed when he realizes that the library is so immense that he doesn't even know where to start looking. He climbs the stairs with a sigh, murmuring that he really wishes Zara to go up there to help him. Today turns out to be his lucky day, as Zara appears right next to him. When he sees her, Rio illuminates with excitement and runs to her, explaining, he came to compare the records of past eclipses and great tides, but he is completely lost on where to look for them. Saris tells him that he is lucky because she knows exactly where those records are kept, so he guides him there. He doesn't drive. He asks if he thinks there might be a connection between the eclipses and the great tides. Rio replies that he suspects that there might be a partial link. Upon hearing this, Ceres agrees and tells him he's right to think about it, confirming his suspicion. He then explains that he had already studied that topic before and discovered that every great tide in history was preceded by an eclipse.
However, he points out that this time it's different, since it wasn't just any eclipse, it was one total. That's what makes this chaos unusual. Curious, he goes to Rio and asks him how he managed to come to the same conclusion. Rio gets tense with the question, realizing that he can't tell you the truth that he was struggling against a comma right in the middle of the eclipse. To avoid suspicion, it quickly changes the subject and the question will be that it determines the brightness of a magic stone. You will immediately realize that you are just trying to evade the question, but still, he answers. He tells you that the longer a monster lives, the brighter and more vivid it becomes his magic stone. He agrees, saying that he himself learned it during a past trip with a friend. But what worries him is that all the stones he collected from the monsters during the tide turned out to be pale and opaque. They had been brightly colored had meant that old monsters of the deepest levels of the dungeon were resurfacing. Upon hearing this, he responds that the pale stones suggest that the monsters had barely appeared recently. Rio agrees, but then points out how strange it is that an entire group of monsters suddenly appears and, all at the same time, emerging out of nowhere. That said, if the monsters were created artificially, Rio points out that it would have required a huge amount of mana. Sarah agrees, admitting that there are still too many mysteries around this case. However, it reveals that she already knew about the pale magic stones. Ancient records of a great tide mentioned that the monsters of that time also had pale stones, and the river was shocked to hear that such records exist, but Sina explains that they are in very bad condition, so much so that even most librarians know of their existence. She asks if she wants to see them, and Rio immediately replies yes. It guides you to the place where the records are kept. Meanwhile, adventurers remain trapped in the abyss. Carl breaks in silence, saying that the strange sensation they have just experienced reminded him of the magic of teleportation that he once lived in a dungeon in the western provinces, that they have been transferred, probably to another floor of the dungeon to confirm. Or he asks one of the group's wizards to check if their instruments work. The wizard checks and says that the one who uses wind magic works perfectly. He believes the team on the surface should be able to send them information about their location. Upon hearing this, Louise cheers up with hope, saying that once they know where the team on the surface is, they will surely ask for help. But Harold is not so confident. He says something feels strange in the aura surrounding this place. Looking towards Rilla, she asks if she has also noticed it. Rilla concentrates for a moment and then says that the aura is almost identical to the one she finds in the sanctuary square. Abel recognizes the reference immediately, understanding. They speak of a sacred spell that high-ranking priests can perform. Riga explains more. It is considered supreme defensive magic, capable of blocking all physical and magical attacks. Upon hearing this, Abel concludes that they are trapped within a gigantic barrier. And she already agrees, pointing out that it must be huge, as they can't even perceive where the limits are. Abel then turns to Lean and asks her to use her surveying technique to scan the surroundings. She does and quickly reports that there are multiple human presences about 500 m ahead. Around 1,000 humans and 50 life forms he had never found before. Harold assumes it must be Clive and his group, as they were probably dragged into this abyss in the same way. With that, the group decides to head towards the human signatures. Meanwhile, Hugh finally arrives at the entrance to Christopher's dungeon. Christopher informs him that the adventurers were probably teleported to the 40th floor and immediately the weight of the situation. Reaching that floor is impossible, and even if they mobilize all the adventurers in the city, Christopher warns that the real problem is not only despair, but the cause. If you don't know why it happened, there is no guarantee that it won't happen again. He refuses to put himself away his men in such danger. Hugh agrees, saying that it would be reckless to risk local adventurers in those circumstances. For now, all they can do is wait and have hope in the meantime. Though Cliff and his team are ambushed when purple flames fall from the top, some adventurers manage to raise barriers and survive, while others are burned alive by observing the monsters, as Clive's eyes open in horror. They are demons. I had only read them in books, but their appearance perfectly matches the descriptions. You do your best to counterattack, but clearly they are being surpassed by the demons shortly after. Avil and the others arrive at the scene shocked by what they see. Rilla looks closer at the monsters and immediately recognizes them as demons. Ganans are enemies of the gods and angels, immune to most magic and much stronger than any other human. Len's voice carries a tone of fear as he asks why hell would even be down here. Harold hesitates and orders adventurers to prepare for battle. Meanwhile, Cliff begins to accept his fate. Since the demons continue to advance and they don't have a true means to fight, but right then several magic arrows fall on the demons at once, the adventurers on Harold's side launch long-range magic attacks against the demons. To their surprise, they really cause them harm. Rilla is shocked by that discovery, as the books claim that demons are immune to magic. It turns out that those records were never confirmed. The adventurers, they hold their possession with their spells, but the overwhelming number of demons worries. Harold fears that the Magi will stay in a week before they can defeat the Tied Up. Abel quickly decides that they will have to join the battle in hand-to-hand combat, while that in the battlefield not so much bigger demon than behind the others. Abel realizes that that must be the boss demon and that defeating him could be the key to ending this fight. Abel guides his group directly to the battlefield together. They manage to make their way through several waves of demons with ease. Arrow watches them in the fight and now understands why the Crimson Sword group has such a good reputation. But after a few minutes of fighting, both Lynn and Rilla are left without, leaving them vulnerable. They ask Warren to cover them, but the situation worsens when they reveal that they have also run out of magic possessions.
Abel quickly observes the battlefield and sees that there are 6 demons left. He starts wondering if they will really be able to finish the fight without the support of Lean and Rhea. At that moment, Rhea urgently warns Abel that the demon with dizzying eyes is actually a demon prince. He explains that is an immature form of a dark lord and that there can only be 4 at a time. Brill adds that only one hero has been registered defeating one, so Abel must be extremely careful. Hearing this, Abel makes a decision, takes a step forward and declares that he will fight to defeat all the demons, except for the Prince Demon, since there is still the possibility that something unexpected will break the barrier and help them escape. Looking back, Rilla, with a smile, tells him no.
Gets sad by facing the demons again. Abel thinks this situation isn't even close, as terrifying as when the Tap once put his eyes on them. With that, he throws himself forward and defeats the demons using only his sword. That's when Prince Demon himself steps forward, and clearly saying that he wants a one-on-one duel with Abel, and the demon clashes fiercely. But it's not long before Abel realizes the huge difference in power. Deep down, he knows he has no chance. The Magi, forcing them to the limit, gather the last of their mana and throw it against the demon prince, but the spells have no effect. Confirming that the magic is completely useless against it. To make things worse, the remaining demons continue to bombard them with fireballs, slowly wearing out their defenses. With their forces fading away and without hope in sight, the adventurers begin to accept the gloomy possibility that this is their end. The demon charges against Abel, and as a last resort, Abel unleashes his secret sword technique, aiming to cut off the head. But the demon moves away in the last moment and knocks down Abel with force against the ground, using his sword as support. Abel strives to stand up, having accepted his fate, simply apologizing to Rhea for being too weak. The demon prepares to kill him when suddenly a drop of water falls from the ceiling and the river falls from above. landing perfectly. It's the first time. Confused, Skillful asks what Rio does there. Rio responds with confidence, saying that he is there to save them. He suggests that they retire immediately, but Abel quickly warns him about the powerful prince of demon he has been struggling with. Rio looks at the demon and mocks, saying that the creature is too weak to be a true demon prince. Confidence begins to walk directly towards him, but Abel begs to stay back, insisting that the demon is dangerously strong. The demons then launch a long-range attack against the river, but he blocks it with complete calm, using his ice spear technique in the next instant after his water jet attack, cutting off the heads of the remaining demons with just one blow upon seeing his men. With such ease, the demon prince gets nervous and squeezes his sword tightly, but Rio only smiles, draws his ice sword and says it's best to finish this once and for all. Natalia runs into the Rio room looking for him, but her roommates inform her that she is not there, as she went to the Northern Library. She thanks them and is in a hurry, but unfortunately she doesn't know where it is, so she asks for help again. After finally getting the directions, Natalie finds Rio on the street to see how exhausted he looks. He immediately asks her what's going on. She explains that Abel and her group have disappeared inside the dungeon. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Rio creates a ice cart and tells him that they can argue with them. While they are traveling, she tells him everything with curiosity. He asks why he came to him specifically. Natalia explains that Abel once told him that if he ever needed help and he wasn't there, he had to go with Rio, because he would never refuse. Our prota is proud that his friend thinks of him so well and decides to go into the dungeon. But the guards block his way without wanting to waste time, creates two ice walls and forces make its way. Natalie had told her the signal came from the 40th floor, so she knows she can't afford to go down floor by floor. Giving his ice magic, he opens a hole in the ground that takes him straight to the lower levels. Finally, they reach the 40th floor, where Abel's group desperately needs help. Rio mocks the Prince of Demon, asking him why he doesn't seem eager to fight. He raises his spada almost like challenging him to attack. The devil eventually charges against him, but for Rio it is too slow. With a single sidestep, Rio cuts his hair, beheading him cleanly. He thinks the devil is painfully slow compared to Leonor while Abel watches him incredulously, wondering what kind of technique that was. But to everyone's surprise, the demon calmly unites his cut head again. Rio believes that the demon prince is only compensating for his lost strength, but still seems too weak for someone in his rank. Before he wonders if the creature can even understand it. Although there is no time to talk, instead he decides to test his regeneration powers. Rio invokes 256 jets of water that hit the Prince of Demon from all directions, slicing it into thousands of pieces. He even breaks his magic stone, but before it can shred, the Prince Demon freezes it, leaving everyone amazed. Relieved, Abel thanks Rio for saving their lives. Our prota responds calmly that he will accept the apology by inviting her to eat for free, and Abel promises delighted to invite him all week.
Y runs to Abel and Drassa while he feels guilty for making her worry. Then, Arthur presents himself as an advisor to the Royal Wizard's office and personally thanks Rio for his help. Rio took it lightly, saying it's nothing, but he can't help but notice the fallen wizards. Arthur acknowledges this, explaining that some were not lucky enough to survive. He adds that once his wizards recover enough mana, they will begin to gather the remains. Abel suggests that he also collects the magic stones from the demons to sell them and distribute the money to the families of the fallen. Rio agrees, but wonders what he means. Abel with Demon Abel explains that creatures like this and supposedly have not appeared in the central provinces in hundreds of years. This makes Rio remember how Leonor presented himself as an Akumar and in. He begins to wonder if there is any difference between the two when he notices him lost in his thoughts. The others ask him if something happens. Rio then mentions that as he descended from the 30th to 40th floor, he felt a special field, although it seems to have disappeared. Now Abel suggests that the field may have faded because they defeated the demon prince. Rio agrees, pointing out that in a typical dungeon, defeating the boss usually activates a safe exit. Abel doesn't fully understand what he means, but Rio continues to explain that when he arrived, he perceived something strange near the stairs. He thinks they should investigate it when he returns. Maybe this.
Connected to what happened there, you notice that the demon's magic stones are black. Arthur remembers that, when he was an adventurer, he once ran into a demon in the western provinces, although he failed to defeat it. He adds that this is the first time he has seen a magic demon stone. Lil agrees to point out that there are also no records of those stones in the temples in the provinces.
Arthur continues to explain that demons appear suddenly and randomly, which has led many to believe that they possess magic and time, a revelation that surprises Rio a lot. Meanwhile, another group of heroes gathers around a man-made altar when Leonor suddenly appears after seeing.
In a somewhat unusual sense, the group leader takes a brave step forward, declaring that she is the demon lady she will defeat. Leonor is surprised, shocked to hear them call her Dark Lord. Another member of the group explains that the altar was built with great sacrifices and that,
widely, when he is turned on, the Dark Lord would be summoned. Leonor wonders who those people are and why they would want to summon such a being. The boy presents himself as a hero named Roman, declaring that he will kill the Dark Lord. Upon hearing that he is a hero, Leonor's eyes shine with emotion. He thinks that since he has the title of hero, he must also be strong. Facing him will give her great fun. Leonor prepares to fight against Roman, but he is too weak and she easily defeats him. Then she tells her teammates that they are free to attack her if they wish, but she warns them that if they do, she will have no choice but to defend herself. The mind also notices that they should be more concerned about their fallen hero. He then notices a black gem and thinks that, although the fight was very boring, picking it up would justify his effort. Roman calls her Mrs. Dark again, which irritates Leonor. She tells them that if everyone worked together, maybe they could defeat the current Mr. Dark, leaving the group surprised, even adding that there are humans as strong as her. Leon doesn't remember her fight with Rio, saying that the group was truly enjoyable.
Being shocked when he realizes that she wasn't a demon lord after all, he finally introduces himself as Leonor and tells Roman to become the strongest human he can so that one day he can have a suitable battle. However, Roman still refuses to believe that there can be a stronger human than him. Before leaving, Leonor smiles
and tells Rio that he's about 10,000 times stronger than him. Meanwhile, Rio and the others take another group of Luan adventurers. Arthur suspects that CLYPH's men probably hired them, hoping to secure the route to the 11th floor. Abel then realizes that not only his 10th and 11th floor groups were teleported to the 40th floor, a black origin realizes it must be the anomaly he perceived before. Arthur admits that he had never seen something like this before, noting that until a moment ago he was emitting mana, but now the energy has disappeared. Fortunately, he has a barrier bag that can prevent the mana from filtering inward or outward. Nastaprota asks if he plans to take it back, and Arthur confirms, explaining that it is the only piece of evidence they have on the way back. Abel thanks Rio again for saving them. He reminds him of his promise to invite him to eat for the whole week, but he adds that if we really want to, would you like to know more about the curry store you mentioned? Abel promises to invite him to a delicious curry, and Rio warns that if he forgets his promise, he will cut it into pieces even smaller than the Demon Prince, something that Abel can't help laughing at. They eventually go outside where he feels relieved to see the years of alms. Natalie welcomes the group and Abel thanks her, saying that it was only because she called Rio that they managed to come back alive. Hugh is happy to see Abel, but he wishes he would be limited to safer jobs on the surface. However, it is clearly noticeable that he is not happy that Rio ignores the warnings of the guards. Rio offers an apology, but Arthur intervenes by noting that they only survived thanks to him. He is surprised to hear this, and Arthur adds that they can discuss the matter in more detail later in the tent. Before going with him, Hugh tells Rio that the issue is not yet resolved. However, he believes that he deserves recognition for the help, which relieves Rio. Arthur tells Hugh that they faced 50 demons and even a prince demon, which leaves him. Stunned, Hugh is surprised that they managed to return alive, although he admits that he shouldn't be too surprised. After all, it was Abel's group. Arthur explains that, although Abel fought impressively, the demon prince almost killed him, leaving Hugh shocked. Then he asks if it was Ryak who defeated the demon, and Arthur confirms it. Arthur asks Hugh who is young, but Hugh admits he doesn't know either. The only thing he knows is that Rio once helped Abel return safe and sound from his journey through the Malvik Mountains. Arthur comments that it's wonderful that Abel has such a powerful ally, someone capable of killing a demon prince in a blink of an eye. Hugh doesn't fully understand what it means in the blink of an eye, so Arthur clarifies that both the Prince of Demon and the other demons were eliminated in a matter of seconds. Arthur believes that there is nothing more important to make sure that his country stays on good terms with this unprecedented wizard. If the aristocrats were to provoke him, it could cause serious trouble. That's why Arthur decides not to leave any official record of Rio's actions. Hugh agrees and also decides to omit the name Rio in his own reports, reasoning that his city can't afford to have such a powerful enemy in the morning. The Rivers go out to eat with their friends, but they have difficulty keeping up with the pace. He encourages them by telling them that the important thing is to keep moving forward, even if they have to go slower later, while walking. The River City feels a little restless, thinking that maybe it's because yesterday's battle ended so abruptly. Suddenly, he perceives an aroma in the air coming from a nearby restaurant and runs quickly there. When he opens the door, he finds it in there. Bring by the delicious curry. She tells her she's the best in the city and even invites her to sit next to her. The painter asks them what level of spiciness they want, and they both ask for a medium spicy Rio. So, you notice that it's wax. You've finished a dish of curry. It is hard to explain that elves have a high metabolism and insists that he is not trying to compete with him. Rio simply replies that he never said anything about it. She asks Rio where she lives and he says she stays in the guild's dormitories. She bothers him by asking if that's where all the rookies live, but then she guesses that, as she visited the library on the north side, she must be at least in the rank of. Rio confirms that she was promoted to rank of when she registered, which impresses her, as she already considers him quite strong. However, Rio says it is the. Every time someone says that, think for a moment. Then she suggests that maybe others just don't know what to look for. After finishing her meal, he asks her why she hasn't seen her in the guild, despite being an adventurer. She explains that she was recently working in the royal capital and how, in a long-term contract, she does not visit the guild frequently. She will reveal that she is a fencing instructor for the Order of Knights of the Marquis of Lun, which makes Ryu wonders and also teaches fencing. She tells her that she is much stronger than she seems. He was a little too close and leaving him nervous. Curiously, he asks if he has plans, as he would like to have a practice fight with him. Rio, although a bit nervous, agrees to accompany him before. At the beginning of their duel, Sarah comments that since she entered the restaurant, she could feel her frustration, as if she was hungry for a real fight. Surprised, Rio asks her how she found out he could use a sword. Sarah smiles and explains that she is also a bearer of both magic and sword. With this, both of them formally begin their practice combat. He throws himself at him, but Rio manages to run his attacks, which impresses him by deciding to stop restraining himself. She unleashed all her power. Rio quickly realizes that she has become much faster, and during close combat, his sword breaks, forcing him to surrender for his. Surprised Zara is delighted. It's the first time someone has managed to resist her wind mind technique. Only then, Rio realizes that she had been using wind magic to increase her speed. Will it be the question who taught how to fight like this? And he replies that it was his mentor, the same one who gave him his tunic. Tapping the hits, she realizes that she was the king of fairies. Amazed, she comments that she is truly lucky, since the king of fairies is practically a legend. Right then, Rheta arrives to remind her of her appointment with the master Alfonso before. Sarah tells Rheta that Rio is important to her and asks her to accompany her home, leaving Rheta visibly surprised. As she walks outside, Rheta remains surprised that this boy is so important to Sarah. Right then, Rio meets Hugh in his carriage, who invites him to climb during the. Hugh mentions that Arthur has already informed him about his heroic battle, but that he can't just overlook his disobedience, so he has a job for him as a lesson. Hugh tells Rio that since he registered, he's only taken work related to dungeons.
Therefore, as punishment, Rio will be responsible for accompanying a group of merchants on a round trip to Wiznash. The next day, Nils and his comrades meet with Rio to ask for help with a mission. Rio immediately notes how serious it should be, as Nils is speaking much more formal than normal. He explains that his hometown, Avala, has issued a hunting petition. Normally, he would have taken it himself, but the petition is qualified for adventurers from rank D onwards. Ito explains that he and Nils were barely recently promoted to rank E after helping in the Great Side, but still do not qualify. Then Nils asks Rio if he would agree to temporarily join his group so they can take on the mission together. Amon notes that the targets are skeletons and goblins, which is strange as those creatures. They usually don't appear in the same area. When they hear these rivers, they smile enthusiastically, excited to finally be able to fulfill their old dream of fighting against skeletons. He immediately tells him that he accepts later. That same day, everyone goes with Hugh and informs him that they plan to accept the mission. Now with the help of Rio, Hugh begins by explaining that the original request, it came from Kailati. Nils replies that he already knew and adds that the request had been sent to Lud after no one in Kailati could complete it. Hugh agrees, but adds that Gaylady had already sent adventurers twice, the first, in a group of E rank, the second, a group of rank D river, and the others find it hard to believe that even a group of rank D failed in something that sounds as simple as hunting skeletons and goblins. Hugh. According to the report of the D rank group, Their problem was the lack of cooperation on the part of the people. Things got so bad that the whole village turned against them. Amon suggests that perhaps that town has always been hostile to the outsiders, but Nils does not agree, saying that although they are not the most people-friendly, would never go to the extreme of open hostility, leaving that aside. Hugh smiles and admits that he is relieved that Nils and his comrades are taking care of the petition. Still, he warns them to be careful, as the Rank E group returns seriously injured, reporting facing more than 30 skeletons. Still, Hugh believes that with Ito as his priest, the team should be able to handle him as long as they don't let their guard down. He reminds them that they still have a couple of days to prepare for the trip, so he asks them to do the best and, above all, return home safe and sound. The group begins their journey to Bali. To everyone's surprise, the journey took a long time. They realized that they advance faster than the adventurers who tried the mission before them. That this is proof that his daily resistance training has paid off. Maybe all that brutal run was really worth it? When they arrived, some of the locals greeted Nils warmly, telling him that it has been a good time. Rio realizes this and feels somewhat relieved with the villagers having a good relationship with Nils. Less means that he was not expelled for being some kind of public enemy. Rio had assumed that Nils was in exile, since just looking at him he always appeared to be the guy who causes trouble. For Rio, it felt natural to think that Nils had been banished and forced to become an adventurer. He gets a little nervous when he hears this position, so he quickly changes the subject, suggesting that they go see the mayor and ask about the situation. Nils opens the door of a cabin and finds Bulin, the town mayor. Bulin can't believe what he sees in his eyes. That Nils has finally returned home after hugging. Gulen comments that Nils looks much more mature. Now Nils laughs, insisting that this can't be true, since he's only been out for about 1 year, but Bulin insists that there's something different about him, that he doesn't anymore. He has the same reckless and problematic attitude for which he was previously known. The others manage to hear this and can't help but go to each other. Bulin then notices the group that is behind Nils and asks, "Who are they?" Nils introduces each one as members of his team, and after exchanging greetings with Bulin, everyone sits at a table. Once settled, they explain to Bulin that they have come to take care of the famous hunting petition. Bulin admits that he feels that Nils' group might have more chances than the previous adventurers, especially because she understands how everything works in the village. With that resolution, Nils mentions the issue of the second group of adventurers. He says that his report claimed that the village refused to cooperate with them, so he asks Bulin what really happened. Bulin took a sip of water slowly before answering. He explains that everything started when skeletons began to appear in the forest. At first, they were only seen occasionally in the eastern forests, but over time their presence became more constant. Then they started. Goblins are going to appear too, but this time in the southern part of the forest. That's why he made the request to marry them. However, Boland continues, the first group of adventurers caused a big problem. They chose to fight in a place where they shouldn't, shedding blood deep in the southern forest. To this, when the second group of adventurers arrived, the villagers reacted with an eye and kicked them out. Boland admits that asking outsiders to be careful with the place where they fought was asking too much, especially when they were in a life or death struggle. But Bulin explains that the towns have been ordered for generations to avoid that particular place. When listening to this, Niels finally understands why the Santias treated the last group of adventurers with such coldness. Then he turns to his comrades and apologizes, admitting that they probably don't understand everything that's been going on. Niels explains that it's related to a local custom, but also involves village secrets, how he can't share the full details without permission. The council kindly asks them to be patient. Later that night, while Nils is away trying to get approval from the old lady, Rio and the others chat with Nils' younger brothers. They tell the group that Nils never cared much about agriculture since he was a child. All he wanted was to leave the farm behind and become an adventurer as soon as he was old enough. But after his parents passed away, he stayed in the village until last year to raise his siblings until they were strong enough to survive on this. Nils' comrades admit that this is exactly to him. Even if he doesn't prove it, he is actually very considerate. Nils' younger brother adds that he doubts that someone in the village assumes that they will take care of the hunt. The last group of adventurers ignored the traditions and recklessly jumped into the forest. But, as Niels knows the customs well, there shouldn't be any problems. This time a few moments later, Niels returns from the council and announces that they have been given permission to carry out the hunt. He suggests that tomorrow they focus first on the goblins and then take care of the skeletons. He also says he received permission to share important information with them, although he stresses that he should keep it a secret and not tell anyone. Niels begins by explaining that there are two special things about this village. The first is the guard beast that lives in the forest. He's surprised, as it's the first time he's heard something like this. A2 intervenes saying that he had heard of certain villages that have guardian beasts, although he hadn't realized that this was one of them. This Rio is excited, imagining the guardian corrupted by an evil god and attacking them along the way when he sees Rio lost in his fantasies. Niels brings him back to reality. Rio admits that maybe he got carried away too much and then asks about the second important thing. Niels explains that he has to with the village sanctuary, but the old woman insisted on explaining it to herself, as it was already late. She would have to wait until the next day to hear it the next morning. Bolin takes the group to the area where the most sightings of kobolins had been reported normally. The children play there, but for now they have been warned to stay away, although of course, some still break the rules when they hear this. Rio annoys Niels, telling him that he was probably that kind of child. What? Clearly, he touched a sensitive point at that moment. The others notice several footprints of goblins at that very moment. Rio looks into the distance and perceives that more than 10 goblins have already opened on the way and will arrive in less than 5 minutes. Upon hearing this, Niels suggests that they fit with everyone except one and then follow the survivor to his lair to eliminate them all at once. They go deeper into the forest, where Rio uses his technique, ice bonding, to freeze several goblins. Being that the others finished them with their swords, as they planned, they leave a goblin alive and let him escape back to his den. This leads them to the entrance of a cave, where they see a group of goblins gathered. When they arrive at the river, they launch their ice tank again and the others kill the frozen creatures without difficulty. Just when they believe that the fight has ended, a huge general goblin emerges from the shadows with an overwhelming aura. Ammonius and Niels immediately recognize him as the same type of monster they faced during the Great Mary. Convinced that he has no chance, they prepare for defeat, but at the moment, Rio invokes ice chains that envelop General Goblin, dragging him to the ground and holding him completely. All that remains is for Niels to give the final blow back. Rio tells Niels that he is relieved that they managed to win without casualties, and best of all, they secured General Goblin's magic stone. Niels, upon returning to the village, the old woman, Nasu, congratulates them for defeating the goblins. She tells them that she knows they must be tired, but her next task is to enter the forest and confront the guardian beast. However, she warns them that there is a possibility that the beast is corrupted, in which case they would have no choice but to fight against it. Realizing that this means that he could have the opportunity to fight against a guardian beast, and once again he loses in his fantasies. Just as Niza retires, Itho notices a strange object subjected to his tank and quiet question, what could it be, as they go into the forest. Ithalo's curiosity, so ask if the amuleto in the bottom of Nasu is an emblem of the goddess Mother Earth. Naso confirms that it is and even praises it, saying that, being a very polite priest to recognize him, Rio, however, has no idea who or what the Mother Earth goddess is. Ito explains that a long time ago the goddess of light and the Mother Earth goddess were part of the pantheon of the U7, but, with the passage of time, people assumed that all the priests only worshipped the goddess of light, which caused the other 6 deities to fall into oblivion. When they hear this river, they ask him if that means, since she can't use elementary magic of the healing of light, she responds that she can use creative magic, but it's different from that of the priests in the temple. In fact, by serving the Mother Earth goddess, she doesn't even need spells to cast spells like most priests. It doesn't take long before they arrive at the hideout of the guardian beast, Nasal, announcing that, and he has brought people to take care of the hunting mission. Rio can hide the emotion in its fashion, secretly hopes that the guardian beast is corrupted so she can fight against it. But when the guardian appears, it turns out to be a huge blue wolf who greets Nasu as an acquaintance. Rio sits, immediately disappointed to realize that there will be no fight after all. The guardian beast hardly pays attention to the others, but when he fixes his gaze on the river, he presents himself as a Nugazai, asking for the name of Nasu. Olin is surprised, for never in the story of a guardian beast had revealed his name so casually. He explains that he never shared it before, because humans always had trouble pronouncing it. But meeting a water wizard, he feels it would be rude not to do it. Guardian continues explaining that he has a certain relationship with the fairy town and that simply being close to Rio will make him feel at peace. Rio remembers that Zara once mentioned that he liked the King Ada and started to ask if he has any hidden trait that attracts fairies. He thanks Nokasi for his kind words, but Nokasi insists that he is the one who should be grateful. Meeting Rio makes him feel like he's going to live 1,000 more years, although in reality he only has a few decades left. The Guardian, gets serious and explains the details of the hunt. He says there are about 30 skeletons inside the sanctuary. However, he notices that there is also a particularly powerful skeleton sitting there, as the user alone is not strong enough to contain it. he himself has been suppressing it. Once they finish off the others, he will release that one to face it a couple of minutes later. Ito uses his priestly magic to defeat the last of the minor skeletons. The group then stands in front of the sanctuary, ready to face the strongest enemy. They open it and are shocked to see an arco-skeleton emerge. Ryo quickly creates ice hammers for each one, explaining that he will be in charge of immobilizing the monster while they wear it out with the hammers. Make a signal for Nukyuze, who releases the arco-skeleton. This one loads forward with incredible speed, but Ryo immediately creates a super slippery ice floor, causing him to lose his balance and fall. This gives Nils the opportunity to be a devastating blow in the neck, destroying the arco-skeleton. After the victory, he enters the shrine, where a note was born that part of the shrine jewel is missing. He is not too surprised, as the former priest of the village had told him the story. The jewel once shone loudly, but one day it became dark and murky. The guardian beast had also mentioned that her cave was receiving a strong flow of energy from somewhere else, suspicious. He said that the origin of the sanctuary also considers the repeated attacks of goblins they have faced. Upon hearing this, Ryo opens his eyes with amazement, asking us if this was related to the way Niels's parents died. He continues explaining that, despite all the goblins' incursions, the village never managed to locate its real hiding place. However, Nils' group found it immediately, suspecting that the goblin's cave itself could be absorbing the power of the sanctuary, which would allow it to generate endless goblins. To solve this problem, Nezo declares that he will use spells to collapse the cave completely, avoiding muskoblins from appearing. The next day, Ryo and his group get ready to leave and say goodbye to everyone in the village. On the way, Nirs tells Ryo and Amon that once he and Ito move, he will have to buy or rent a house. He asked them they would like to live together. Amon accepts with enthusiasm immediately, but Ryo says he needs time to think about it, as he still has things to consider. Meanwhile, in the guild, Hugh asks Abel to cover him at the Waynash Open Festival. I would only have asked Phelps, but Phelps is already busy with other tasks. Abel sighs, but agrees to help only this time. On the other hand, the wise soldiers are engaged in a fierce practice. It's suddenly interrupted when one of the lieutenants throws a fireball in the air, forcing them to stop. The lieutenant gets angry and shoots a fire arrow that almost hits one of the soldiers, yells at them warning that they should never let their guard down, even when a fight appears to be over. He then announces that the commander has arrived to give important news. The commander steps forward, praising the soldiers for her performance. However, she declares that she brings orders directly from Her Imperial Majesty. She and the lieutenant will depart for White Nash, and the next one, and they will be outside for about 2 months. Before leaving, he is told that he expects to see a big improvement when he returns. As they walk away, the commander comments that the lieutenant must be in a good mood. After all, the last time consoled under the guard, he shot him directly in the leg. She believes that the mere vision of her fire arrows is more than enough to keep them disciplined, since afterwards, he is the dreaded infernal wizard. This was the end of the 9th episode, says the word part 10 to know that you got here. Watch next screen video, subscribe and act